What if you could only travel back in time, but only as long as it takes to drink a cup of coffee? And what if you couldn't change anything that happened? You could only observe and experience that moment again. So that is the central concept of Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This Japanese novel takes place in a small town in a Tokyo cafe where certain customers travel back in time, but you guessed it, they must return before the coffee gets cold. For today's video, I am reading the first book of the series Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and I'll be sharing my reactions throughout the whole video. But with further ado, let's get into the video. So right now, I currently have the book on my tablet, so I'm just gonna focus on reading the book on my tablet, and I'll just let you know whenever I get to a certain point that I really would like to share. So one thing that I learned from this book is it feels a lot like Freaky Friday, if you've ever watched that movie where they've swapped bodies and they end up having to relive and see each other from each other's perspective. Obviously, it's not like that because it involves time travel, but there's two couples that are fighting, and I am so sorry. A lot of these names are Japanese names, so I might butcher them. But there's a couple. The guy's name is Goro, and I think the woman's name is Fumiko. And they end up getting into a fight, and Fumiko, she regrets her breaking up with him, and she wants to go back to the cafe and rekindle things and make amends. So she ends up going to this specific cafe where she can travel back in time. And they're like telling her the rules of like you can't change. So even if you go back in the past, you can't change the outcome of what happened, but you can travel in the past. So I found that a little interesting where you can't really change the scenario of it, but you can still travel back in the past. It makes no sense to me because most people want to make amends. So it's interesting on how this is going to play out when the characters know that they can't change the past. But I am going to continue on, and I'll just let you know what else I find in this book. Okay, so I am a little bit into it. I still haven't actually managed to get a dent, but another thing that I realized in the rules is that each person has to sit in a particular seat and stay in that seat throughout the whole time that they've traveled in the past. So I'm just honestly, I'm still very confused on the premise of this book, because let's say I wanted to go back and travel back in time, and these were the rules for me, I wouldn't go back in time because like what would be the point? So I'm still confused on why the main character still wants to go back in the past. And then there's another caveat with that as well, is that you have to sit in a particular seat, but sometimes there are people sitting in that seat. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there is a problem with that as well. So again, there's just so many hurdles to this, and I just don't understand why anyone would want to go to this amount of hurdles to go back in time where you can't go back and change anything. Doesn't make sense to me. But I'm still on for the ride, and I just don't understand why someone would want to. I guess for me it's like what is the motivation that someone would want to go back in the past if they can't change it? Do they just want to see the person, see how things would pan out? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'm going to still continue on because it is getting interesting, and I don't want to give everything away because I don't want this to be a spoiler video, but I'll try to weave around my reactions about the book. Okay, so the light now has definitely changed and it's hitting me in the face, so I'll make this brief. I didn't realize that this book had 4 chapters and each chapter had its own story. So I finished the first story. I was actually surprised on how funny it was. I thought it was going to be very I don't know, like very like cumbersome, but I actually thought it was kind of funny at certain moments. It was definitely, I did not predict on how the first story was going to end. I'm going to go through all the other stories and then I'll just let you know my closing thoughts of everything. But I am definitely enjoying it because it's not something I would have thought of on how it would actually end. Okay, I just finished the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and there are a couple of things that I thought were interesting because I don't really read a lot of Japanese books. It's very interesting on how other people tell a story compared to books that are written in the US. So, one thing that I've noticed is the way that it's written is very simple. It's hard to put into words, but the word karaoke is a Japanese word, and it translates to an empty orchestra. And that's what I feel when I read this book. So, for example, a lot of the background, the area, it's a coffee shop. A lot of the people, it's a very simple concept. There's not much information beyond that. However, when you get into the stories of each person in the book, you then start to feel the pain of the people because each person, they're coming for a reason. They're coming because they've had a relationship in the past that they can't forgive and they can't forget. So it feels very empty, and it feels like a very empty coffee shop, or it feels very empty when you start seeing all of the conversations. But then when you get into the actual plot of the book, then you start feeling the pain of the people who feel immense guilt from the decisions they made in the past. And throughout the book, I was still like very confused by the restrictions of this time traveling coffee shop because I felt like there's just so many stipulations. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me why someone knowingly would continue to pursue someone in their past, knowing that they couldn't fix anything or change anything. And I realized from reading each chapter that the reason why they wanted to do it is so they can have closure in their lives. And it's not something that I would personally think of because I haven't lost someone closely to me. I guess for me, I couldn't conceptualize why someone would want to go to this length. But now, after reading all the stories, I can see why someone would do it regardless of not being able to change the outcome. A lot of those people still are willing to do what it takes because they still want to see these people, and they still want to see these people even if they can't change the past. I would say I would give this book a 3.5 stars. And the reason for it is because I really like I like the concept of it. I wish that the stories were a lot longer. We got to see like the past of the stories, but I just wish there was more information on the past of each person. We had more depth to the characters and we had more chapters of their past versus them just saying and telling and talking about the past of each character in the story. But overall, I really enjoyed the book and I definitely recommend it to anyone. So I think there are around 6 books within the series. So if you want me to read the second book or just finish the whole series, just let me know. But that's all I have for this video. Let me know if you want me to read any specific books. But I'll see you in the next video.